The sound of breaking glass shattered the midnight silence, and Willa Harper's eyes snapped open to see three shadows moving past her window in the moonlight, their boots scraping against the wooden boards of the porch outside her small house on the edge of Redding, California. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she heard their low voices, rough and determined, and she knew with absolute certainty that the threats her late husband's business partners had been making for the past 3 months were about to become terrifyingly real. She slipped from her bed, her nightgown catching on the rough wooden frame, and pressed herself against the wall beside the door. Through the thin walls, she could hear them arguing about who would kick the door in first. Her mind raced through impossible options. The sheriff was 2 miles away in town, and even if she screamed, her nearest neighbor was old Mrs. Patterson, half-deaf and living a quarter-mile down the dusty road. She was alone, 23 years old, widowed for 6 months, and 3 men who believed she owed them money from her husband's failed mining venture were about to break down her door. "Just do it already," one of them hissed. "We gave her enough warnings. She thinks because Thomas is dead, she does not have to pay what he owed." "My brother was a fool to lend him that money," another voice said, deeper and angrier. "But that debt does not die with him. She has this land, this house. We will take what we are owed." Willa's fingers trembled as she reached for the shotgun she kept by the door, the one her father had given her when she married Thomas Harper 3 years ago. She had never fired it at a person, only at tin cans and the occasional coyote that got too close to her chickens. The weight of it felt both reassuring and terrifying in her hands. "Please," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "Please just leave. I told you I need more time. The land has not sold yet, and when it does, you will get your money." "We are done waiting," the first voice said. "Open this door, Mrs. Harper, or we will open it for you." She heard the heavy tread of boots, the creak of someone preparing to throw their weight against the door, and she raised the shotgun with shaking hands, knowing she could not actually shoot someone, knowing they probably knew it too. The door rattled in its frame as someone tested it, and then she heard another sound, different from the others. Hoofbeats, fast and getting closer. "Someone is coming," one of the men said, and she heard the note of uncertainty in his voice. The hoofbeats stopped right in front of her house, and she heard the jingle of spurs, the soft sound of someone dismounting. Through the window, she could just make out a tall figure in the moonlight, broad-shouldered and moving with the easy confidence of a man who knew how to handle himself. "Evening, gentlemen," a new voice said, calm and measured with a hint of something dangerous underneath. "Pretty late for a social call, is it not? This is none of your business, stranger," one of the men said. "Keep riding." "Well, see, I was planning to do just that," the stranger said. "But then I saw 3 men lurking outside a lady's house in the middle of the night, and my mama raised me better than to just ride past that. So why do not you tell me what business you have here?" "She owes us money," the deeper voice said. "Her dead husband's debts. We have every right." "That's so," the stranger said. "And does the law agree with you? Because I do not see any badges on your chests, and I do not recall hearing about any court judgments. Looks to me like 3 men trying to intimidate a woman alone in her home." Willa moved closer to the window, trying to see the man who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not even had time to form. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that touched his collar and a hat pulled low over his eyes. Even in the dim light, she could see the 2 revolvers holstered at his hips, worn with the ease of someone who knew how to use them. "I said this is none of your concern," the first man said, and Willa heard the threat in his voice. "There are 3 of us and one of you. Do the math and ride on." The stranger was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had gone cold as a mountain stream. "I did the math. Seems to me 3 cowards against 1 woman are pretty poor odds. But if you want to make it 3 against 1 man, well, that suits me just fine. Though I should tell you, I have been riding for 2 days straight. I am tired and hungry, and I am not in the mood for this nonsense. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to get on your horses and ride back to whatever hole you crawled out of. And if you ever come back here and bother this lady again, you will have to go through me first." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Willa held her breath, her finger still on the trigger of the shotgun she hoped she would not have to use. "You do not know what you are getting into, stranger," one of the men said, but she could hear the uncertainty now, the calculation happening in the darkness. "Maybe not," the stranger agreed. "But I know I am getting tired of talking, so what is it going to be?" She heard muttering, angry whispers, and then the sound of boots retreating, of horses being mounted. "This is not over," one of them called out. "Tell her that debt is still owed." "I will tell her you are yellow-bellied cowards who prey on widows," the stranger called back. "Now get." The hoofbeats faded into the distance and Willa sagged against the wall, the shotgun suddenly weighing 100 pounds in her arms. She heard the stranger's boots on her porch steps, a gentle knock on her door. "Madam," he called out softly, "they are gone. You can open up, I mean you no harm." She hesitated, years of caution warring with the gratitude flooding through her. This man had just saved her from something terrible, but he was still a stranger, and she was still alone. But something in his voice, the respect in how he addressed her, made her set down the shotgun and pull open the door. He stood on her porch, hat in his hands now, and she got her first clear look at him. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with a strong jaw shadowed with several days of stubble, and eyes that even in the darkness seemed kind despite the hardness she had heard in his voice moments before. He was dusty from travel, his clothes well worn but clean, and there was something solid about him, something that made her feel safer just standing in his presence. "Thank you," she said, and was mortified to hear her voice crack. "Thank you. I do not know what would have happened if you had not come along when you did." He gave her a slight nod, his eyes respectful, not lingering where they should not. "Isaac Hayes, madam, just happened to be passing through on my way to Oregon. Saw the light in your window and then saw them and, well, could not just keep riding." "Willa Harper," she said. "And I am grateful beyond words, Mr. Hayes. Those men, they have been threatening me for months about money my late husband supposedly owed them. I have been trying to sell the land to pay them, but no one wants to buy right now, and they are getting impatient." Isaac looked out into the darkness where the men had disappeared. "How much is the debt?" "They claim it is $800, but I have only seen papers for 500, and I am not even sure those are legitimate. My husband, Thomas, he was not always careful about his business dealings, and after he died in that mining accident last winter, I found out he had borrowed from several people I never knew about. $800 is a lot of money to be threatening a woman over without going through proper channels," Isaac said slowly. "Makes me think maybe they do not have the law on their side." Willa wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware she was standing in her nightgown talking to a strange man, but too exhausted and shaken to care much. "I think you might be right, but I am alone here, Mr. Hayes, and 3 men with guns are persuasive whether the law is on their side or not." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. Then he said, "Madam, I know this might sound forward, but would you mind if I bedded down in your barn tonight? I have a feeling those men might come back before morning, and I would rest easier knowing you had someone nearby if they do." Relief flooded through her so strongly she almost cried. "I would be grateful for that, Mr. Hayes, more grateful than I can say." And please, in the morning, let me fix you a proper breakfast. It is the least I can do." He smiled then, and it transformed his whole face, made him look younger and less dangerous. "I would appreciate that, Mrs. Harper. Been living on hardtack and jerky for longer than I care to remember." A home-cooked meal sounds like heaven right about now. She watched him lead his horse, a beautiful roan mare, toward the barn, and then she closed and barred her door, the shotgun back in her hands but her heart considerably lighter than it had been 10 minutes ago. She lay back down in her bed, but sleep would not come. Instead, she stared at the ceiling and thought about Isaac Hayes, wondering what kind of man rode through the night and risked his life for a stranger without asking for anything in return. When dawn broke pink and gold over the scrub hills surrounding her property, Willa was already dressed and working in her kitchen. She had eggs from her chickens, bacon she had been saving, fresh bread she had baked the day before, and strong coffee brewing on her stove. It had been months since she had cooked for anyone but herself, and she found herself taking extra care, wanting the meal to be perfect for the man who had quite possibly saved her life. She heard him moving in the barn, the sound of him tending to his horse, and then his footsteps crossing her yard. He knocked softly before she called for him to come in. He had cleaned up somehow, his face freshly shaved, his hair damp as if he had used the pump outside to wash. He looked even more handsome in the morning light, and Willa felt a flutter in her stomach that she had not felt since before Thomas had died, maybe even before that if she was being honest with herself. "Morning, Mrs. Harper," he said, and his eyes lit up at the sight of the food on her table. "That smells incredible. Please sit," she said, gesturing to the chair, "and eat as much as you want. I have plenty." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, Isaac making appreciative noises that made her smile despite everything. Finally, he pushed back his plate with a satisfied sigh. "That was the best meal I have had in 6 months, madam. Thank you. You saved me from something terrible last night," Willa said softly. "A few eggs and some bacon seem like poor payment for that." Isaac studied her across the table. "Can I ask you something, Mrs. Harper? Do you have anyone? Family, friends who could help you with this situation?" She shook her head. "My parents died of cholera when I was 17. That is when I met Thomas. He seemed kind and stable, and I was alone and scared. We married quickly, maybe too quickly. His family never approved of me, said I was beneath them, so when he died, they wanted nothing to do with me. I have some friends in town, but no one who could stand up to men like those last night." "What about the sheriff?" "Sheriff Morrison is a good man, but he is old and has arthritis so bad he can barely draw his gun anymore. And his deputy is his nephew, who is more interested in drinking than enforcing the law. I went to them a month ago when the threats started, but they said without proof of harassment, there was nothing they could do." Isaac frowned, his fingers drumming on the table. "I do not like leaving you here alone, but I have a job waiting for me in Oregon. A ranch that needs a foreman, and I gave my word I would be there by the end of the month." Willa felt her heart sink but forced a smile. "Of course. You have your own life, your own obligations. You have already done more for me than I had any right to expect. I will figure something out." But even as she said it, she had no idea what that something would be. Selling the land would take time those men clearly were not willing to give her. She had perhaps $50 to her name, not nearly enough to satisfy them even if their claim was legitimate. Isaac stood and walked to the window, looking out at her property. 20 acres of rocky soil, a small house that needed repairs, a barn that was listing slightly to the left. Not much to look at, but it was hers, or at least it would be once the debts were settled. "How long do you think it would take to sell?" he asked. "I do not know. A few months, maybe more. Land is not selling well right now with the drought we have been having. The creek that runs through the back of the property still has water, which helps, but it is not enough to make it attractive to farmers." He was quiet for a long moment, and she could almost see him thinking, working through some problem in his mind. Finally, he turned back to her. "What if you had some help? Someone to fix up the property, make it more attractive to buyers. Someone who could also make sure those men do not come back and threaten you." Willa felt her breath catch. "Mr. Hayes, I could not ask that of you. You have your job, your own life to live." "You are not asking," he said. "I am offering. That job in Oregon will wait a few weeks, and if it does not, well, there are always other jobs. But you need help now, and I find myself not liking the idea of riding off and leaving you to face those men alone." She stared at him, trying to understand why a stranger would do this for her. "Why?" she asked simply. "You do not know me. This is not your problem." Isaac came back to the table and sat down, his expression serious. "My sister," he said quietly. "She was widowed young, left with debts and 2 small children. She had no one to help her, and the men her husband owed money to, they were not kind about collecting. She lost everything, the house, the land, everything. Last I heard, she was working in a laundry in San Francisco, barely making enough to feed her kids. I was in Texas at the time, working a cattle drive. By the time I got her letter telling me what had happened, it was too late. There was nothing I could do." His eyes met hers, and she saw the pain there, the regret. "I cannot help her now, but I can help you. And maybe that is selfish. Maybe I am just trying to make myself feel better about failing my sister. But either way, if you will have me, I would like to stay and help until this situation is resolved." Willa felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I cannot pay you much," she said. "I have a little money and I can feed you, but that is about all." "I do not need much," Isaac said with a slight smile. 3 meals a day and a place to sleep in the barn is payment enough, and maybe, if you would not mind, some more of your cooking." Because that breakfast was worth staying for all on its own. She laughed, surprising herself, and felt some of the tension that had been coiled tight in her chest for months begin to loosen. "You have a deal, Mr. Hayes, though I insist you sleep in the spare room, not the barn. It is not much. Just a small room off the kitchen, but it has a real bed and a door that closes." "I would not want to impose or cause any talk," Isaac said carefully. "People will talk regardless," Willa said with a shrug. "They always do when a young widow is involved. But I know my own reputation, and I know that having you here, visible and protective, will likely keep those men away better than any gun. Besides, you would be doing me a favor. That room has been empty since Thomas died, and I hate walking past it every day, seeing it unused. It would be good to have someone in it again, to have this house feel like a home instead of just a place I am existing in." Isaac nodded slowly. "All right then. Thank you, Mrs. Harper. I will try not to be any trouble." "Willa," she said impulsively. "Please call me Willa, Mrs. Harper makes me feel ancient." He smiled again, that smile that made her heart do strange things. "Only if you call me Isaac." Over the next few days, Willa watched in amazement as Isaac transformed her property. He fixed the lean in the barn, replaced broken fence posts, cleared brush from around the house that had been a fire hazard she had been too overwhelmed to deal with. He worked from sunrise to sunset, and in the evenings, he would come in dusty and tired, and they would eat together and talk. She learned that he was originally from Missouri, that he had been working as a ranch hand and occasional scout since he was 16, that he loved horses and open spaces and the feeling of riding under a big sky. He learned that she had once dreamed of being a teacher, that she loved to read whenever she could get her hands on books, that her marriage to Thomas had been comfortable but never passionate. a practical arrangement that had suited them both well enough, but had never been a great love story. "Do you think that is sad?" she asked him one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sun set over the hills. "To have been married for 3 years and never really been in love." Isaac was quiet for a moment, whittling a piece of wood with his pocket knife, the curls of cedar falling around his boots. "I think," he said slowly, "that there are different kinds of love. There is the practical kind, the kind that makes sense on paper, that looks good from the outside. And then there is the kind that hits you like a lightning strike, that does not make any sense at all but feels right anyway. I do not think either one is wrong, but I do think the lightning strike kind is rarer and harder to find. Have you ever felt it?" She asked, then immediately wished she could take the question back. "I am sorry, that is too personal." "No, it is all right," Isaac said, his knife still moving in steady strokes. "And the answer is no, I have not. Come close a few times, thought maybe I was feeling it, but it never quite got there. I always seemed to be passing through wherever I was, never staying long enough to really let anything develop. Started to think maybe I was not made for that kind of thing, that I was meant to be a wanderer." "Is that why you are going to Oregon? To wander some more?" He looked at her then, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "I was going to Oregon because it seemed like the next place to go. But lately, I have been thinking that maybe I have been wandering because I had not yet found a reason to stay put." The air between them felt charged, full of things unsaid, and Willa felt her heart racing. Before she could figure out how to respond, they heard hoofbeats and both of them tensed. Isaac was on his feet in an instant, his hand on his gun, but it was just old Mrs. Patterson on her sway-backed mule, a covered dish in her hands. "Evening, Willa dear," Mrs. Patterson called out cheerfully. "Brought you some of my apple pie. Figured you might want something sweet, what with all the work you and your hired man have been doing around here." "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson," Willa said, coming down the steps to take the pie. "That is very kind of you, Mrs." Patterson's sharp eyes took in Isaac, standing protective and alert on the porch, and she gave Willa a knowing look. "Good to see you have some help around here, dear. A woman alone can attract all kinds of trouble. A strong young man around the place will discourage most of it." After Mrs. Patterson had ridden off, Willa brought the pie inside, and she and Isaac shared generous slices at her kitchen table. "She was checking up on me," Willa said with a laugh, "making sure you are respectable." "Am I respectable?" Isaac asked with a grin. "I suppose that depends on one's definition," Willa teased. "You did threaten to shoot 3 men a few nights ago." "Only if they made me," Isaac pointed out. "I am very reasonable that way." They laughed together, and Willa realized how good it felt, how long it had been since she had laughed with someone, felt comfortable enough to joke and tease. Thomas had been serious, focused on his business ventures, on making money and building a future. There had not been much laughter in their marriage. 2 weeks passed in a pleasant rhythm of work and meals and evening conversations. Willa found herself looking forward to Isaac coming in from whatever project he was working on. Found herself taking extra care with her appearance, wearing her better dresses instead of her old work clothes. She caught him watching her sometimes, and when their eyes met, there was a warmth there that made her feel things she had not felt in years, maybe ever. The property was looking better than it had in years, and Willa even had interest from a rancher 2 towns over who was looking to expand. But as the land became more appealing, as the possibility of selling became more real, Willa found herself less and less enthusiastic about it. Selling meant paying off the debt, yes, but it also meant leaving, starting over somewhere new. And increasingly, starting over somewhere new meant leaving Isaac behind, and that thought made her chest ache in a way she was not ready to examine too closely. Then, on a hot afternoon in early September of 1883, the three men came back. Willa was in her garden, picking tomatoes for dinner, when she heard horses approaching fast. She looked up to see them, the same three from that night, riding up to her house with determination written on their faces. Her heart jumped into her throat, and she dropped her basket, tomatoes rolling across the dusty ground. "Isaac," she called, and he was there almost instantly, coming around the side of the house with a hammer still in his hand from where he had been repairing the chicken coop. He took one look at the approaching riders and set the hammer down carefully, his hands moving to his guns. "Get inside," he said quietly to Willa. "Bar the door." "You will have to go through me first," Isaac said, his voice carrying clear and strong as the men pulled up their horses 20 feet away. "I thought I made that clear last time." The leader, a thick-set man with a scar across his cheek that Willa could see clearly in the daylight, sneered at Isaac. "Still here, are you? Thought you would have moved on by now." "Thought wrong," Isaac said. "Now state your business and then leave because you are not welcome here." "Our business is with Mrs. Harper," the man said. "She has had plenty of time to come up with the money she owes us. We are here to collect." "Funny thing about that," Isaac said conversationally, though his eyes never left the men and his hands hovered near his guns. "I have been asking around in town, talking to people who knew Thomas Harper. You know what I found out? That he borrowed $300 from your brother, not $500, and certainly not $800. I found out that he paid back $100 before he died. So by my math, even if your claim is legitimate, she owes you $200, not $800. The man's face darkened. "You calling me a liar?" "I am saying your numbers do not add up," Isaac said calmly. "And I am saying that three men showing up in the middle of the night to threaten a woman, not going through any legal channels, not presenting proper documentation, seems like the actions of men who know they do not have the law on their side. So here is what is going to happen. Mrs. Harper is going to sell her land in her own time for a fair price. And when she does, if you have legitimate claim to any of that money, if you can prove it in court with proper documentation, then you will get what is actually owed. But if you set foot on this property again without proper legal authority, you will answer to me. And trust me when I say you do not want that." "Big talk for one man," another of the riders said, his hand moving toward his gun. "Try me," Isaac said, and the coldness in his voice made even Willa shiver from where she stood frozen in her garden. "I have faced down Comanche raiders and Missouri bushwhackers. 3 cowards trying to intimidate a widow do not particularly worry me. But if you are feeling lucky, go ahead and draw, see what happens." The tension was so thick Willa felt like she could not breathe. The three men looked at each other, clearly doing calculations, weighing odds. Finally, the leader spat into the dust. "This is not over," he said. "She still owes the debt." "Then take it up with a judge," Isaac said. "In the meantime, ride out, and if I see you around here again, I will not be so understanding." They left, but slower this time, less confident, and Willa watched them go with her heart still pounding. When they were out of sight, she ran to Isaac, her hands shaking. "They will be back," she said, "or they will find another way to hurt me." Isaac holstered his guns and turned to her, his hands coming up to grip her shoulders gently. "Willa, listen to me. I am not going to let anything happen to you. You understand? I made you a promise when I decided to stay, and I keep my promises." She looked up at him, at his steady eyes and strong jaw, and something inside her broke open. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing all this for me?" His hands moved from her shoulders to cup her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks so gently she almost cried. "I think you know why," he said quietly. "I think you have known for a while now, just like I have." "Isaac," she breathed. And then his lips were on hers, tender and seeking, and she was kissing him back with all the longing and fear and hope that had been building inside her for weeks. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she felt safe in a way she had never felt before, safe and wanted and cherished. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard, and Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I did not mean to, did not plan on it, but somewhere between threatening those men and eating your cooking and talking with you every evening, I fell completely in love with you. And I know it is too soon. I know you might not feel the same, but I needed you to know." "It is not too soon," Willa said, tears streaming down her face now. "And I do feel the same. I love you too, Isaac. I think I have been falling for you since the moment you stepped up to protect me, since the first morning we had breakfast together. I have been so afraid to admit it, afraid it was wrong or too fast, or that you would leave and break my heart, but I love you." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she felt like she was falling and flying all at once. When they broke apart, he was smiling, that smile that transformed his whole face. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is crazy, I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but marry me, Willa. Let me stay and protect you and love you for the rest of our lives. We can sell the land or keep it, go to Oregon or stay here, I do not care. I just want to be wherever you are." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Isaac, I will marry you." They married a week later in the small church in Redding with Mrs. Patterson and a few of Willa's friends from town as witnesses. Willa wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a trunk, and Isaac bought a new suit that made him look both handsome and slightly uncomfortable. Sheriff Morrison himself performed the ceremony, and if he thought the courtship had been quick, he was wise enough not to say so. That night, in the house that was now theirs together, Isaac carried Willa over the threshold and set her down gently in the kitchen. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, trying out the name. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Willa said, reaching up to kiss him. "So do I." They moved his things from the spare room into her bedroom, into their bedroom now, and Willa felt a joy she had not known was possible. Thomas had been a considerate husband but never passionate, and their intimate moments had been dutiful rather than enthusiastic. With Isaac, everything was different. He touched her like she was precious, like he could not get enough of her, and she responded with an enthusiasm that surprised them both. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets in each other, Isaac traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "I want to build you a better house," he said. "Something bigger, sturdier, a house for a family." "A family?" Willa asked, her heart swelling. "If you want," Isaac said. "I would love to have children with you, a whole houseful if you are willing. Boys who can help with the land, girls who can help their mother in the garden. A real family, Willa. The kind I always dreamed about but never thought I would have." "I want that too," Willa said softly. "I want everything with you." The next morning, they rode into town together to speak with Sheriff Morrison. Isaac had been thinking about the debt situation, and he wanted to settle it properly, legally, so those men would have no claim on Willa anymore. Sheriff Morrison listened to their story, his weathered face growing more and more angry as Isaac described what he had discovered about the actual debt versus what the men were claiming. "That is fraud," the sheriff said flatly. "If what you are saying is true, they have been trying to extort Mrs. Hayes, or Mrs. Hayes as she was, for money she does not actually owe. I will look into this, get the proper documentation, and we will settle this matter once and for all." It took 3 weeks, but Sheriff Morrison was thorough. He tracked down every person Thomas had borrowed from, got written statements and receipts, and when he was done, he had a clear picture. Thomas Harper had borrowed a total of $600 from various people before his death. He had paid back $200 of it. That left $400 in legitimate debts, nowhere near the $800 the three men had been claiming. "The way I see it," Sheriff Morrison told them in his office, "you owe $400 to various creditors, but the men who have been threatening you are only owed $200 of that. I have sent word to them that if they come around again making false claims, I will have them arrested for fraud and extortion. I have also contacted the other creditors, explained the situation, and most of them have agreed to wait for payment until you sell the land, with fair interest." "Thank you, Sheriff," Willa said, feeling like a tremendous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "Thank you so much." But settling the debt legally did not settle it in the minds of the three men who had been hoping to collect much more. 2 nights later, Willa and Isaac were woken by the smell of smoke. Isaac was out of bed in an instant, pulling on his pants and boots. "The barn," he said, looking out the window. "They set fire to the barn." They ran outside together to see flames licking up the side of the old structure. Isaac's horse, stabled inside, was screaming in panic. Without hesitation, Isaac ran toward the burning building. "Isaac, no!" Willa screamed, but he was already inside, and she could hear him talking to his horse, that low, calm voice he used with animals. A moment later, he emerged leading the terrified mare, both of them singed but alive. As they watched the barn burn, unable to do anything to save it, Willa saw movement at the edge of her property. 3 riders, silhouetted against the flames, watching. Then they were gone, disappearing into the night. "They are not going to stop," Willa said, her voice shaking with anger now instead of fear. "Even with the sheriff's warning, they are not going to stop." Isaac put his arm around her, both of them filthy with soot and ash. "Then we end this," he said grimly. "Tomorrow we end this." The next morning, Isaac rode into town and sent a telegram. 3 days later, a U.S. Marshal arrived in Reading, a hard-faced man named Daniel Cooper who had known Isaac during his time in Texas. "Isaac Hayes," Marshal Cooper said, shaking his hand. "Been a while. Your telegram said you needed help with some men committing arson and extortion." Isaac laid out the whole situation, and Marshal Cooper's expression grew colder with every detail. "Sounds like you have got yourself a real problem here. Let me talk to the sheriff, get the documentation, and then I will pay these gentlemen a visit. If they have been making threats, burning property, they have crossed from civil matters into criminal, and that is federal jurisdiction." Within a week, Marshal Cooper had arrested all 3 men. The evidence was clear between witness statements, the documentation of their fraud, and the fact that several people had seen them near Willa's property the night of the fire. They were taken to Sacramento to stand trial, and Marshal Cooper assured Isaac and Willa that they would be spending considerable time in prison. "You are safe now," Marshal Cooper told them before he left. "Those men will not be bothering you anymore, and Isaac, it was good to see you. You seem happy, settled. It suits you." With the threat finally, truly gone, Willa and Isaac could focus on building their life together. They decided not to sell the land after all. With the debt much smaller than they had feared, and with Isaac's savings from years of work, they could pay off the creditors and keep the property. Isaac built a new barn, bigger and better than the old one, and he started breeding horses, something he had always wanted to do. Willa planted a larger garden and started selling her vegetables and preserves in town. The property that had felt like a burden began to feel like a home, like a place with a future. In the spring of 1884, Willa discovered she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening as they sat on the new porch he had built, watching the sunset. "A baby," he said, his eyes wide with wonder. "We are going to have a baby in the fall," Willa confirmed, laughing at his expression. "Around October, the doctor thinks." Isaac let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to Mrs. Patterson's house, and then he was kissing her, his hands gentle on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he kept repeating. "We are going to have a baby." He was attentive to the point of being overprotective throughout her pregnancy, barely letting her lift anything heavier than a teacup. Willa found it both endearing and slightly exasperating, but she loved him for it, loved how much he already loved their child. On a crisp October morning, with Mrs. Patterson and the doctor in attendance, Willa gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas, after her late husband, because even though that marriage had not been a grand love, Thomas had been a good man who deserved to be remembered. "He has your eyes," Isaac said, cradling his son with a gentleness that made Willa fall in love with him all over again. "Look at him, Willa. He is perfect." "He is," she agreed, exhausted but happier than she had ever been. "He is absolutely perfect." Thomas was followed by a daughter 2 years later, whom they named Sarah after Isaac's mother. And then another son, James, 2 years after that. Their house, which Isaac had expanded and improved, rang with the sounds of children laughing, crying, playing. It was chaotic and messy and absolutely wonderful. Isaac proved to be a natural father, patient and loving but firm when he needed to be. He taught Thomas to ride almost before the boy could walk, and Sarah was fascinated by the horses, spending hours in the barn with her father, learning how to care for them. James was the wild one, always getting into trouble, always covered in dirt, and Isaac would laugh and clean him up and love him just as fiercely as the others. Willa watched her husband with their children and felt grateful every single day for the night he had ridden up to her door, for his courage and kindness, and the way he had looked at 3 men threatening her, and said they would have to go through him first. That moment had changed everything, had given her a life she had not even known she wanted, a love she had not believed existed. The years passed in the way they do when life is good, both too fast and exactly right. Their horse breeding business prospered, becoming known throughout Northern California. They bought the adjacent property when it came up for sale, expanding their land to 50 acres. Isaac hired a few ranch hands to help with the work, and Willa hired a girl from town to help with the house and the children. When Thomas was 10, Sarah 8, and James 6, Willa discovered she was pregnant again. At 35, she was older than she had been with the other children, and the pregnancy was harder. Isaac hovered even more than he had before, and Dr. Williams, who had delivered all their children, warned them that there could be complications. But in the summer of 1894, Willa gave birth to twin girls, Rose and Lily, both tiny but healthy and strong. Isaac, holding one in each arm, tears streaming down his face, said, "5 children. Willa, we have 5 beautiful children." "We do," Willa said, exhausted but elated. "We certainly do." The twins were adored by their older siblings, who competed to hold them, to help care for them. The house was even more chaotic now, even more full of life and love and noise, and sometimes Willa would stand in her kitchen, listening to her children playing, to Isaac teaching Thomas how to break a new horse, or reading to Sarah from one of her beloved books, or wrestling with James in the yard. And she would feel overwhelmed with gratitude for this life she had been given. She thought sometimes about that night in 1883, about the scared young widow she had been, facing down threats with only a shotgun she had not known how to use and a desperate hope that someone, anyone, would help her. She thought about Isaac riding up in the darkness, about the way he had stood between her and danger without hesitation, about the way he had looked at those men and made them back down through sheer force of will and courage. She thought about how he had stayed, how he had chosen her and chosen to build a life with her, and how that choice had led to all of this. 5 children, a prosperous ranch, a love that had only grown deeper and stronger with every passing year. One evening in the fall of 1900, after the children were all in bed, Willa and Isaac sat on their porch, watching the stars come out. Isaac was 55 now, his dark hair streaked with silver, lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. Willa was 41, no longer the frightened young widow but a confident woman, a mother, a successful businesswoman in her own right. "Do you ever regret it?" Willa asked, taking his hand. "Giving up your plans to go to Oregon, settling down here instead of wandering like you always had?" Isaac was quiet for a moment, his thumb rubbing across her knuckles. "Not even for a second," he finally said. "That night I rode up and saw those men at your door, that was the night my life really began. Everything before that was just waiting, wandering around until I found the place I was supposed to be. And the place I was supposed to be was right here with you." "I love you," Willa said, the same words she had said to him hundreds, thousands of times over the years, but they never lost their meaning. "I will love you until the day I die," Isaac Hayes. "And I will love you beyond that," Isaac said, pulling her close. "Into whatever comes next, I will love you." Thomas grew up to take over the horse breeding business, expanding it even further. He married a sweet girl from Sacramento, and they gave Willa and Isaac their first grandchildren. Sarah became a teacher, fulfilling the dream Willa had once had for herself, opening a small school right there on their property for the children of their ranch hands and neighboring farms. James, true to his wild nature, became a cowboy, working cattle drives and breaking horses for ranches throughout California, though he always came home eventually, unable to stay away from his family for long. The twins, Rose and Lily, were inseparable and eventually opened a bakery in Redding together, becoming famous throughout the region for their pies and cakes. All of Willa's children stayed close, building their own homes on the expanded property, creating a compound of sorts where the Hayes family thrived and grew. By 1910, Willa and Isaac had 12 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild on the way. Isaac, now 65, had slowed down some, but he still rode every day, still worked with the horses he loved. Willa, at 51, had silver threading through her dark hair, but her eyes were still bright, her smile still quick. They celebrated their 27th wedding anniversary with all their children and grandchildren gathered around them. A massive party that spilled out from their house across the yard and into the barn. Watching her family, seeing the life she and Isaac had created together, Willa felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked, coming up beside her and slipping his arm around her waist, a gesture so familiar after all these years that she leaned into him automatically. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Willa said. "How lucky we are. How one night, one moment of courage led to all of this." Isaac looked out at their family, at the children chasing each other through the yard, at their own children, now grown with families of their own, at the land they had built into something prosperous and beautiful. "It was not just that one night," he said. "It was every day after. Every choice we made to love each other, to build this life together, to face whatever came our way as a team, that is what created all this." "You are right," Willa said, "but I am still grateful for that night, for the moment you chose to stop instead of riding past, for the moment you chose me." "Easiest choice I ever made," Isaac said, kissing her temple. "And one I would make again in a heartbeat." As the sun set over their land, over the home they had built and the family they had raised, Willa thought about the scared young widow she had been, and she wished she could go back and tell that woman that everything was going to be all right. That a cowboy was going to ride up in the darkness, was going to stand between her and danger, was going to say the words that would change her life forever. "You will have to go through me first." Those words had been a promise, and Isaac Hayes had kept that promise every day for 27 years. He had protected her, loved her, built a life with her that exceeded anything she had ever dreamed of. And she had done the same for him, giving him the home and family he had always wanted, the reason to stop wandering he had been seeking. Years continued to pass, marked by birthdays and anniversaries, by births and graduations and weddings. Isaac's hair turned completely white, and his hands, once so strong and steady, developed a slight tremor. Willa's joints ached on cold mornings, and she moved more slowly than she once had. But they were together, still in love, still reaching for each other in the night, still sitting on their porch in the evenings and talking about everything and nothing. In the spring of 1918, when Isaac was 73 and Willa was 59, they celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary. All 5 of their children were there, along with their spouses, all 19 of their grandchildren, and their 6 great-grandchildren. It was a massive gathering, and Willa, looking around at all of them, could hardly believe that she and Isaac had created this legacy. Thomas, now 44 and with streaks of gray in his own hair, stood up to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us what love looks like, what commitment means, what family is all about. We are all here because of the life you built together, because of the love you have for each other and for all of us. Thank you for everything you have given us." Everyone raised their glasses, and Willa, tears streaming down her face, looked at Isaac. He was crying too, unashamed, and he took her hand and held it tight. "We did good," he said softly, so only she could hear. "Did we not?" "We did amazing," Willa said. "We did better than I ever imagined possible." That night, lying in their bed, the house finally quiet with everyone gone home to their own houses scattered across the property, Isaac held Willa close. "Do you remember," he said, "that first night when you asked me why I was helping you and I told you about my sister?" "I remember," Willa said, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I got a letter from her a few months ago," Isaac said. "I did not tell you because I wanted to write back first, to see if we could help her. She is doing better now. Her children are grown, but those years after her husband died were hard." But in her letter, she said she had heard about us, about our family and our success. And she said she was glad that I had found happiness, that I had been able to help you in a way no one had helped her. "Oh, Isaac," Willa said, her heart aching for the sister-in-law she had never met. "Did you write her back?" "I did," Isaac said. "I invited her to come visit, to meet you and the children. I thought if she wanted, maybe she could move out here, be part of our family. She is my sister, and I want her to know she has a place with us if she wants it." Willa raised her head to look at him. "Of course she does. Family is family, and if she needs us,